Welcome to the Pin Leader Podcast, where strategic leaders get straight to the topics, strengthening our awareness and sharpening our minds. The Pin Leader Podcast is produced by Roar, a production division of Mays & Associates Ltd. Find out more at www.maysassociatesltd.com. Now here is your award-winning host, Dr. Shanda Gore.
Hello, and welcome back to the Pin Leader Podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about AI at work, and I am so glad to have with me two experts in this area. I have Mr. LeSean Shaw, who is the Chief Operations Officer of Actuality Reality Technologies and a co-founder of Empowered AI, a nonprofit tech company focused on building an inclusive and thriving tech ecosystem in the Toledo area. With experience promoting equitable access to technology at state and federal levels, LeSean has influenced policies that bring resources to Ohio, and through events like Tech Night, he fosters collaboration and innovation, aiming to make technology a key driver for economic and social growth. I also have with me Mr. Tom Bush, who is the CEO and innovator at Actual Reality Technologies, an Industry 5.0 and AIML consulting firm who's also in Toledo, Ohio, leading transformational AI-driven projects in manufacturing. Previously, he was part of building advanced avionics of GE Aviation, is a master black belt in Lean Six Sigma, and was Amazon's large enterprise cloud migration and autonomous AI expert. Tom works with leading manufacturers to apply AI in reducing defects, optimizing operations, and driving product innovation. He, in addition, is the co-founder of Empowered AI, and of course, I just mentioned how it's a nonprofit dedicated to empowering underemployed individuals to grow their careers in tech with the help of augmented intelligence. So without further ado, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Excellent. So I'm going to just start off. This is an amazing time because AI is growing and is growing fast. And for those that are listening, they may say, well, wait a minute, I don't know if it's that exciting or not. But I'll start with you, LeSean. How do you see AI transforming not just the operations, but leadership decision-making itself in manufacturing or in corporate settings?
I think it really allows people the opportunity to really think critically beyond some of the current goals or milestones that they have set for their company. A lot of times as leaders, you have this understanding that, what you've done in the past is what you should stick to. And this really allows them the opportunity to think a little bit more forward thinking, to provide them with not just the access to the information that they need, but new and innovative ways to put that together with the ideas that they would like to move forward with, to make their companies and their employees better as well, too.
Mm-hmm. What do you think about that, Tom?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, along those lines, we're seeing the C-suite being able to use prediction and forecasting that comes through machine learning or AI and make better data-driven decisions versus looking in the rearview mirror. Now the executive has these tools that can get them, the forward-looking views they need to make really fast decisions. And that's really what we're trying to do, is accelerate decision-making and making really great data-driven decisions and having all of those tools at the ready. And if you've used any sort of AI tool, you can feel how quickly it can readily get things to you. And so I think that's the age we're in now, where the executive has this opportunity to see their business in a way that they haven't seen before, that gives them these new insights and ability to make better, faster decisions.
I was just recently at a conference and we were talking with leaders who are struggling. They're trying to figure out what AI bot, what AI agent should I be recommending within my organization? And we're talking across a number of industries. What would you suggest? LeSean, I'll start with you.
Well, one of the first things I would suggest to any individual that's looking to start utilizing artificial intelligence is to have the realization that AI is not a one-size-fits-all type of tool. Just because I can use ChatGPT and get the results that I'm looking for does not mean that the next individual is going to get the results that they're looking for or get the exact same output that they're trying to achieve as well. So I think one of the greatest understandings is that there are a plethora of different tools that are going to be available, whether there's going to be chatbots that are available like Claude, Perplexity, Copilot. Of course, we speak all the time of ChatGPT, but there's also more recent ones that have come out like DeepSeek as well as too. So it's just having an understanding that just like a personality type, there are going to be different GPTs that are going to be out there that are going to be they're going to have a little bit more affinity towards because of maybe how they look, what they're going to present you with, and the output that you're being able to receive when utilizing those different tools as well too.
And they're constantly outdoing one another.
Absolutely.
So being an AI first company, Actual Reality Technologies, we started with AI at the core, right? So we knew we were going to be teaching everybody AI and then getting people to embrace it. So we started with it right out the bat. So my employees have access to all the different ones. And the reason we do that and see it as a value is, number one, if you're not paying for it, you should definitely be paying for it, because they tell you right up front they're stealing your data if you're not paying for it. So that's super important as a first go in. So we pay for it, right? But the reason we're excited to pay for it is because we know the $20 a month, the productivity my team is getting is well beyond $20 a month. And so it's a no-brainer to pay for it. And so we actually find that having access to ChatGPT and Claude.ai and Copilot, Microsoft Copilot, and Google Gemini, all four, is valuable because one day, like right now, Gemini is the best coder. But if you back up 2 months ago, Claude was the best coder. And they keep just racing each other to the finish line. And so we found it as successful, and I don't recommend this for most companies, but we do provide our people access to all four of those popular ones. Copilot, it's great that ChatGPT kind of is becoming the new verb for Google, right? It is the new Google in the AI age. So great for them that they got the namespace, but I'm finding that Copilot seems to be winning pretty fast because most of our customers in the enterprise have Microsoft products already, and Copilot's kind of built in. And so it's interesting to watch because it comes with I think it's like $35 or something price tag. And so our customers kind of cringe at that price, per person. Wow, that feels like a lot. But then you look at the productivity that they're going to get off of it and the integration of how quickly it can be reading your emails and summarizing them for you, or looking at your calendar and telling you what's next, or going into your data and finding files that you need and referencing them specifically. That's so powerful. And the speed at which you can now act is important. And so I think that's where one thing that we help executives see is the value that they personally get, that each of their individuals get, and why it's worth actually paying for it.
It's interesting you say that because Copilot, when it first started, I had a number of clients who were like, what is going on? Why is this even being offered? And this was about a year and a half ago. And they're like, all because they updated the new Microsoft, and they're all of a sudden it's sitting right there. And they're like, well, if it's sitting there, maybe I'll try it. And I think Microsoft has done a great job in trying to integrate that into something you already are aware of. You didn't really need to download it because it's really built on the side. Now, I will say this, it can get a little intrinsic, and it can also intrusive, because then it's wanting to rewrite your emails. And I do talk to clients about being careful also to make sure that if you do allow it, because it does save time with sentence structure and grammar, but if you're going to allow it to rewrite something, that it is critically important, I talk about this in the book, to make sure that it's in your tone, and that legally you're still responsible for whatever's in that email. So if it's not your tone, and if it doesn't have the right information, if something's hallucinating and you're pulling information in, then you're still responsible for it. So I think that's that cautionary tale, I think, that you're kind of alluding to. I hope so. So
yeah, we're super passionate about what we call augmented intelligence, and that encourages it's a human-centric view of AI. So how do we use AI to superpower the human? And to your point, everything we build, we require human in the loop, and that means ultimately you're responsible for what you're turning in, right? And you're responsible for what it's producing. And so I think that does, put the onus on the human to use it as a tool. That just reminds us that it's just a tool. Like, don't believe that everything it produces is perfect, because it's not. And it's not in your tone generally. And oftentimes when I bring somebody new into the company and they see that I'm, encouraging the use of AI, suddenly these emails that come to me are so verbose. And I'm like, come on, guys. Like, I don't copious amounts of time. It's great that you wrote that email super fast, but now I have to slowly read that email.
Yes.
And so, keep it slim and, keep it right. So you do have to take some responsibility and know your audience, and all of that responsibility you had before, you still have now. right? So
I agree. What do you think about LeSean?
I think that's a really important piece with just having an understanding that there's a responsibility that goes along with this. Just like any responsibility, just don't give kids the keys to a Ferrari and say, hey, you can drive, go out there and do it. There is a huge amount of ethics that goes along with this as well, too, with just having a really good understanding of, what you should be doing, what you shouldn't be doing, the parameters, what can be allowed, what is not allowed. And then having that understanding, not just in the professional setting, but on your personal settings as well, too. How can I utilize this to augment myself, to augment my own ideas, to create, to be innovative as well, too. So there's a huge amount of responsibility that goes into that fact. Just like if we were to go to Wiki, when Wiki came out and said, hey, America started in this year, that is something that is going to be up to us to really be able to find out, is that true? Just because the information is readily available and it was available immediately, we still have to vet that information and fact check it as well, too. So that human in the loop aspect that Tom talks about is really important, because a lot of times when people think about utilizing artificial intelligence, they have this idea that someone is going to go there and just say, create a proposal for kids, about a literacy program. That is sort of irresponsible, because you have not created any parameters for that program that you would like to say. You haven't said, how this program is supposed to be, what age it's supposed to be for, what time is it supposed to be available, what's the subject matter that's associated with it. And that is all the human's responsibility in order to really augment the work that you're creating.
Mm-hmm. So I'm hearing a couple of things here. One, I'm hearing that companies should have policies that will add to the parameters to the conversation about any AI agent coming in. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. I think that one of the things that Tom and I hugely talk to, not just organizations, but individuals about, especially in leadership, is about understanding that if employees don't have parameters or a policy that is set in place, how should they know what they can do and what they can't do? How can they know when they are allowed to use it versus when they are not allowed to use it? And a lot of times leadership is having this concern about, we're worried about if our staff is using it. You shouldn't be worried. You should be aware that your staff is using it. And you should be aware, just like you're aware of the fact that you have a late policy, you have a internet policy, you have a credit card usage policy as well, too. And that is so you can be safe. And that's so your employees can be safe as well, too. And that is very important.
Mm-hmm.
it's also one of the keys to getting your grassroots adoption moving, because it allows your early adopters to hook their trailer to something. And as many years in change acceleration, if you don't have a tops down, your bottoms up can't really drive all the way. And so you create that tops down policy saying, this is how we want you to use it, and make sure it says we want you to use it, right? And in this way. And don't put PII in it. And, here's the creative ways to not put PII in it. But then that gives your grassroots, your early adopters, an opportunity to say, hey, look, I am allowed to use it. Here, boss, this is how I used it. And then suddenly you'll have this fire lit in your employees.
So that leads me to my next question, which I've seen when talking with organizations across. Again, I call it a continuum, because I've got on one side, I've got individuals who are like, yeah, it's helping me with my golf game even, which I'm like, oh, that's a creative way of using it, to all the way to individuals who said, if I can get away with not using AI or engaging with AI before I retire, I'm living my best life. And I think it's more such a fear situation going on, but and also calling it names like Terminator, Overlord. I've heard it all. So can you speak to that at all?
Absolutely. So, there's never a moment in which we walk into a room and we talk about artificial intelligence where you don't hear a bit of that. So you have people talking about the Terminator, the Matrix, it's going to take my job. And I have this analogy that I usually will reference in those rooms, because there is a tech wave that's coming, and with that wave, there's a plethora of different artificial intelligence tools that are either already here and getting your feet wet, or they're on the way. And on one side of the street, you have individuals that are really frozen in fear. You have individuals that are saying, it's going to take my job. It is the devil. You have all these people that are like, I just will not use it. I think it's, taking away from the human element, and unfortunately, those people are frozen in that fear. And then you have that same side of that street, but the other side, of that street, where you have individuals that are frozen in the frivolous nature that goes along with, the uses of artificial intelligence. They're making videos, They're making raps and things like that, just kind of playing along with the artificial intelligence. And the thing that's the same about both those sides is that once that tech wave hits, they're all going to be washed away with it. And you're going to have all those individuals that are on both sides that are going to be clamoring, trying to find life jackets and ways to actually save the individuals that are around them, when they probably should have just taken an opportunity to really embrace, the change that was coming.
That's very powerful. What do you think, Tom?
Yeah, learn how to surf. Get that surfboard constructed so when that wave comes, you can float to the top.
It's that time.
That's really good. All right. So here's another thing, too. Looking ahead, what do you think what do you believe, at least, would distinguish effective leaders in workplaces where AI is the norm and not the exception?
Yeah, I think it's going to come back to pace. And you're going to find that when they've embraced AI, the automations that they'll put in play, a lot of the undifferentiated heavy lifting that you do every day of dealing with Excel spreadsheets or transacting with paper and all that, if you're embracing AI fully, a lot of that's going to be automated and put to the side. And what's going to be really cool is this human element is actually going to rise to the top. What will become priority for everybody is human-to-human interaction. Now that the bots are running our business, this relationship aspect is going to be super important and will be what we actually have time to go do.
I talk about relationship building, how critically important it is. And I was actually, again, presenting, and I was saying that I have actually built relationship with AI, and people looked at me and I said, no, because I would like to, and I talk about this in the book, it's so very critically important to make sure that you are in control of your story. I can either have AI tell my story, or I can actually jump in and tell my story. And one of the stories I say is that how it didn't even know who I was initially, and then it started pulling, and it kept referring to me as a man. He is a leadership expert, and he does this and he does that. And I let that go on for 8 months just to see if it finally, like the spiders and the algorithm, would figure it out. And I realized it wasn't figuring it out. It was getting worse. And I said, you know what? I'm going to need to step up and to educate it. And I turned the corner with it by educating it, only because, one, I want to be able to control that story. I don't want anyone looking me up and thinking that we do one thing when we don't do it. And I think that that's a safety net. And I do believe the most effective leaders are really incorporating different ways of using it, but they're doing it in a cautionary and keeping the human side of it foremost.
Yeah, for sure. I think there's going to be a re-understanding of our why. I had a opportunity to talk to a bunch of computer science students. They invited me in, said, hey, can you come talk to us about computer science in the age of AI, right? And I read into that request of, why are we in AI? Why are we doing computer science? If this thing can code, why am I here? And so the very first slide I put up was literally the word why. And I asked the class, why are you in computer science? Why did you pick this degree? And with 50 kids in the room, about 15 responded, and they all responded some flavor of, I wanted to build X. I wanted to make games. I wanted to solve some problem. All of it translates to build something. And so I posed to them, I said, well, if you have this assistant that can code fast and helps you build that thing faster, did your why change? Your why you decided to go into computer science? No. Just because the thing can code doesn't mean you're not still involved in the building of whatever solution you were chasing. And I think that's a very important piece of the puzzle, even down to the administrative assistant. The why the boss has hired an administrative assistant is not necessarily to do all the paper pushing. The why is when my new customer walks in the door, that's my first touch point with that customer. I want a friendly face out front. I want somebody who's greeting them, welcoming them, making sure they're comfortable, giving them a great impression of this company that I've created, right? And so if I have an admin who's able to get past their desk because now the AI has helped them accelerate all the busy work, now they're fulfilling their why the business has them even more. Mm-hmm. And I think if you take any job, that's what we're going to find is that, I was 3 years with Amazon's finance team, 8 years in total with Amazon. And when I was with the finance team, I was helping automate a bunch of processes. And it was super interesting to see how individuals identified that their purpose was, this Excel spreadsheet that they created, and they felt like that was their why. And when you shake them up a little and you say, hey man, you're not being hired to shuffle this spreadsheet. You're hired to think. You're hired to see the future. You're hired to analyze. And so when we automate that job away so that they can have time to actually do what they're actually hired to do, it actually is a little bit disturbing to them, even though they're doing something that they went to school and now they eventually will feel more proud about the fact that they're thinking more and it's less about the mundane. It's an interesting shift.
And I think, one of the points that Tom is making, an underlying point is really like the evolution in critical thinking. You have a lot of individuals, regardless of industry, that are saying that if you have, let's say, a student, for instance, all students had 10 tasks in front of them. Now the artificial intelligence helps them mitigate 5 of those tasks by being able to accomplish those. Now you are allowing those individuals the capacity to do so much more. And what does that look like? So for so long, we've gone along and said, hey, this is how education has worked. This is how this process has worked. And now you have a new, more efficient way to look at that process and to break down that process and to evolve that process. And now you're taking certain points and automating those points, or you're taking certain processes and you're taking those off of the plate of your employee. And you're saying, what now can you accomplish now that you have 3 hours of automation that has been taken off of your plate? So it's really about evolving what critical thinking looks like. Even in the case of academia, what more can students accomplish now? Now that you can have something that's going to take care of 1 through 5, how about we add some additional tasks on top of that and say, now you can actually go about building something, creating something that is going to have some heft and reciprocal value in our community as well.
I will say this is one thing I've really talked to leaders is how can you help your workforce become asking more critical questions than where they just mundane questions. And that's a challenge because even coming out of college, and I just spoke to a large group too, and that's exactly what I was saying. These critical thinking, these skills, and unfortunately, we've seen a little bit of a downturn concerning critical thinking skills. We've had professors say that statistically, not so much as a challenge, and they're worried about AI actually taking even more of that away.
Yeah, and to that point, I think, and I made this mention a little bit earlier, there's certain correlations that, if we were to give all 16-year-olds a Ferrari and just say, hey, you all have the keys, we're going to see the fact that accidents are going to go up. Now, are accidents going up because of the fact that these 16-year-olds have not been taught how to drive, or because of the fact that they all have Ferraris at this point? And I think one of the things that we're really thinking about, or maybe not talking as much as we need to about, is that when you release something as broad and as vast and as democratizing as artificial intelligence, where are the people that are really the teachers behind that to say, instead of just releasing this on the world and saying, just go about creating on your own, how can we help them by being very cognizant with allowing them steps and processes and pathways for understanding how to really utilize that artificial intelligence or the tools that they're using? And I think that's a really important point that we really have to, think about that particular correlation, because you're going to see a little bit of critical thinking go down if you're not forcing critical thinking to go up. So if you have the exact same 5 tasks as you had before, and now everybody can complete those 5 tasks, of course they don't have to think as much, but if you add some additional tasks on top of that, you're going to see an evolution in that critical thinking at that point.
And one of the things that we are concerned with and trying to work quickly to figure out is that there's the age-old saying, is it the journey or is it the destination, right? And the correct answer for a long time has been it's the journey, right? The learnings that you get along the way. And one of the strange things about AI is that it fast tracks you to the destination. And so if you get destination, and you never experience the journey, one of the things we have to figure out is how do we get those learnings that we were supposed to get along the way? And I think critical thinking is in that space of like things you learn along the way because you've been there, done that. And I think I just heard on the news today that there are certain companies that have stopped hiring entry-level students, right? And that because they're replacing those jobs, AI is able to solve it. And so they're hiring more experienced folks, and specifically in computer science. And one of the interesting questions then is, well, how do the new students, the new grads, cut their teeth? How are they going to learn? And it's something that we have to struggle with both as an education system and as a society of how do we do that? Even when I was automating at Amazon, some VPs in finance were saying, hey, that job that you just automated and made so simple, I cut my teeth. I learned the business by doing that.
Yes.
So how's my new hire going to cut their teeth and learn the business? And as an automator, I was kind of like, well, that's not my problem. I just saved you millions of dollars. I'm not going to solve that part. But it's a training and learning question. And I think that's where we're not quite equipped with the training and learning to say, how do we teach people in this new world where the destination is so readily available? How do I force you to go down a journey?
Well, it sounds like to me that means my leaders out there that listening, my CEOs, my presidents, sole proprietors, those are overseeing large organizations or small. You really need to do professional development in this space so that you can understand what we're talking about when we're saying going out there and figuring out what you can do. And again, work with your HR teams, and your HR teams go get professional development, because hiring, you just mentioned about the hiring in the next level. That means job descriptions need to be rewritten, and the scope is different, and it's a shift. I remember it was a big book when I was back in school called The Paradigm Shift, and it happens. And I believe right now we're in the middle of another happening, just again, onboarding the next generation of workforce. Let me ask you this as we wrap up, because this is the fun question for those who are like, oh, this is deep. There's a lot going on here. What are you reading and what are you watching that helps inform you, or it helps you just to the next part of the day? So it doesn't even have to be that serious. I'll start with you, Tom.
Yeah, so I do, because it's moving so fast, AI is moving so fast, I tend to watch a lot of YouTube, which is good or bad. I'm not sure how you feel about it. That's either way. It's a way to stay up as long as you have a trusted source. So I'll give you my two secrets. I've got a guy named Matt Berman, who I watch religiously. He's putting stuff out. The great part about AI is that there is stuff to talk about literally every day. So he's putting something out every day, if not every other day. And then there's another guy named Matt Wolf, and he does the similar. He actually curates a website of all of the AI tools, so you can find out if you need to do video editing, what are the AI tools that accelerate that. If you're doing PowerPoint presentations, so he actually has a website that he promotes on the backside, but most of his content is also just like, what's the latest and greatest coming out. And so since I'm a consultant, I have to stay on the edge. That's what I'm watching. But I'll tell you, I'm probably going to go read a book called The Pin Leader Path, because and tips to all those listening, there is an AI section on that, right? About embracing AI.
Yes, thank you. Yes, it's so much work to really work through that whole leadership component. And when we talk about effective leaders, you really need to know AI. You need to know AI. So yes, thank you for that. It's we're quite proud of that work.
There's also a leadership guy that came to my high school and was exclusively teaching band students how to be great leaders. His name was Dr. Tim Leitzenhauser. And I steal his activity where he says to you, raise your hands as high as you possibly can. And most people, kind of put them up. And he says, raise them even higher. And then, his lesson effectively is how many of you were able to raise it higher. There's not always going to be somebody to push you.
That's right.
To go higher.
That's right.
But I use that now, and I show people ChatGPT. I asked it, raise your hands as high as you possibly can. And look here, the very first thing it said was stand up, and nobody would have stand up. Nobody ever stands up. And so I think the trick there is that it's an opportunity for us to see an AI, ChatGPT in this case, as a partner and a coach, and can look at things from a perspective that maybe you haven't looked at before. So
fantastic. What do you think, LeSean? What are you doing?
So right now I am reading a book called Teaching with AI. This is a book by Jose Antonio Bowen, C. Edward Watson. Really good book, just describing the history of artificial intelligence, but also how different methods of integrating artificial intelligence into your teaching as well too. So that's been a really good book for me to go to. And as far as what I've been watching, usually I'll go on either YouTube or one of the social media sites and just watch a bit of what new OpenAI has released or what Anthropic is talking about as well too. So I'm trying to stay on top of these LLMs that are releasing the updates periodically, and just try to hear some of the changes that are coming in each of their new models. So that's really what I've been paying a lot of attention to.
Excellent. Well, I have some more reading to do, and I have some more YouTube to be watching and books to pick up. Yeah, people ask me, and I'm like, it's a lot when you start really looking at what you need to do to stay on top of it. But no fear, so that you just go out there and just dip your toes in there, right?
Absolutely. I think one of the ideas that, Tom and I often talk about is the idea of being a early enabler and not a fast follower. What works for someone else may not inherently work for you, but this is a space where everybody is kind of stepping into, the unknown, so don't be afraid to do your own research. Don't be afraid to, without permission, go out there and to learn on your own. This is a permissionless environment. You can go out there and learn about anything you'd like to learn and become an expert on anything you would like, utilizing those artificial intelligence tools.
Well, I can't thank you enough for both of you coming on and giving those hints on what we should be doing, and then suggestions, really strong suggestions on at least a solid approach on AI. So thank you, Tom.
Yes. Thank you for having us.
And thank you, LeSean.
Absolutely.
Excellent. And thank you to our listeners who are listening to the show and sharing it. We really appreciate your feedback. And don't forget to give it to us at info@mazeassociatesltd.com. We'd also like to thank our sponsor, Realtor Shannon Roof of Berkshire Hathaway Home Services, Kohler Realty, educating clients so they feel confident in their decisions and at the closing table. And don't forget to pick up a copy of the #1 HR Personnel Management new release on Amazon, The Pen Leader Path: Identify, Engage, and Develop Effective Human and AI Leadership for Your Organizational Culture on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, and wherever books are sold. And of course, until next time.
The Pen Leader podcast is hosted by Dr. Shanda Gore and brought to you by Maze & Associates Ltd., creating customized solutions for growth in the areas of leadership development, strategic planning, and culture building. Find out more at www.mazeassociatesltd.com. Don't forget to subscribe to the Pen Leader podcast and share with others.